Hello and welcome to episode 187 of the Cinema Geeks. I am one of your Cinema Geeks, OptimusSolo, and joining me for today's record is MovieRevolt. Dan, hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Not too bad, and we have a couple special guests with us today. Introducing first, let's see, which one should I go with first? Let's go with Matthew Stewart from Simplistic Reviews. Hello, Matt.
One half of the not-so-dynamic trio. That math doesn't even make sense.
No, it doesn't. And joining him is one of his other partners in crime, Mr. DJ Valentine. Hello.
All the souls I've encountered in my travels. This was the most...
I was waiting for one more word. So what we have assembled this crazy concoction of people together today to do is to go back into what we've been doing, what we just started, I guess, with our last episode, which was talking about our top films of the last decade. We're going to do that in different genres. Last time you heard Amanda, myself, Dan, and JD go through the top 10 animated films of the last decade. And today we're going to be talking about science fiction and fantasy films. So it should be an interesting discussion. If you went back about 5 years or so, the folks that we had on the initial record when we did our half-decade list was Dan, myself, Fridley Sant, Matt, and Hyro from True Bromance. So we might reference Matt and Hyro's list a couple times through here or in closing, but it's going to be an interesting countdown for sure. I don't know what your guys' opinions of the different genres of this last decade are, but just to start things off for me, like this list or this genre, we haven't done the exercise to go through the rest of them, but this is like an early contender of what I would think is one of the best genres represented in the last decade. Like with animated films, you know, you're going through and you're like, okay, this is a for sure one. Like I'm for sure going to have Inside Out in there, or I'm for sure going to have like this film in there. I went through my sci-fi list and like marked all the ones that were for sure, and then saw that I had a problem because I had like 20 for sure's, and I'm like, well, that math doesn't work right. But like these are all like all of these could be in my top 5. Like I feel like the science fiction genre was very well represented in this last decade. Now, if you go into just like strictly fantasy, you might run into some more problems because I think like fantasy is just, I don't know if it's like the forgotten genre or what, but I feel like as far as like straight science fiction, we had a lot of gems this last decade. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I think you certainly have a lot of good representation and a huge variety of science fiction. I think, especially just looking at my list, you know, you have high budget, obviously, with science fiction, but I do think this last decade we opened the door a lot more to small budget science fiction films that you could do an amazing CGI. Not that you need CGI for a science fiction film, but more often than not, they will incorporate it in some way and still have an amazing special effects and not have a gigantic budget. You know, it became having indie sci-fi films was, you know, much more prevalent, I think, this last decade than decades before on a high quality level. And I know with science fiction we're kind of combining because, you know, what's science fiction, what's fantasy, what's horror, they all seem to intertwine. I know when I did my list, I tried to focus on those that were science fiction first for the most part. But I guess that definition can vary depending upon, you know, the way you view it. I mean, some people can consider superhero film science fiction, but we're doing our own separate list for that. So, but yeah, I definitely agree. Some of my favorite films of the last decade came in this genre.
Yeah, and another thing that was crazy for me is how much came out in the second half of the decade. Like it was filled with pretty good science fiction films to great science fiction films. So like my list had gone through some major changes, that's for sure, from the 5-year mark to the 10-year mark. And like you said, kind of brought up, and I'll get over to DJ and Matt for their thoughts on this, but obviously with animated films, we had a pretty easy criteria. Let's say it's animated or it's not. Like, I guess you could go into like the debate on how much of the movie needs to be animated, but that's about as close as you can come to kind of deciding what criteria you had to go on for an animated list. Whereas this one gets a little bit more murky, a little bit more gray as far as what qualifies and what doesn't. So I guess each of our definitions of kind of how that worked for us might shape our list a little bit. One thing I was kind of looking to, because since I'm going to be here for all of the different lists, was, you know, if something to me was more so like you're talking about with a comic book or a superhero film, if it was one of the top 10 superhero films it might not have been one of the top 10 science fiction films. Or did I want to save it for that list, that type of thing? So that kind of caused some debate in my own head. But DJ and Matt, you guys did something interesting. You guys came up with a combined list. So was that hard, or was that easy, or kind of what was your process?
Matt and I made, as Matt said earlier, 2 separate lists. We had, to your point, we had only 2 films in common.
Yeah.
So
that tells you a lot about the two of us, basically.
So you're talking about there's a lot of great sci-fi that came out this decade. When we usually watch, he's seen is pretty much what I've seen, and vice versa. And we came up with 20, almost 20 completely different movies.
Nice.
So, yeah. I think we had 2 in common. One we kind of had low, so we kept it low, and then one I had very high that we kept very high. But yeah, it's. I guess Matt can attest it, because there was a couple that were on Matt's list that I was looking at. And I was like, oh man, I don't think I think I've seen that one. I have to go back and watch that.
Yeah, I was a little bit more. I mean, I guess the thing with DJ and I, DJ is definitely the sci-fi guy out of the 2 of us, and especially the 3 of us, I guess, if you include Justin. I'm more of the horror fantasy guy. And to your point, Kev, it was kind of like the beginning of the 2010s. It seemed like there was some good fantasy, and then it just kind of petered off, and just sci-fi was the rule of the day, it seems a lot. So it was kind of interesting, because I made 1, 2, 3 lists, and then DJ and I broke it down. Well, I guess I made 4 lists, and then DJ and I combined our list for a 5th list.
Gotcha.
So I mean, it was a little bit of it, definitely maybe a lack of NCAA tournament action. I was like, I need a bracket. Give me a bracket, please. I'm dying over here.
Bracket buster, baby.
Yeah. And we'll be giving you guys a chance probably to list some of those that were on your individual list that might not have made the combined list, when we kind of go through some honorable mentions at the end, for sure, to kind of hear how that broke down. I tried to do as much cramming as I could, watching a bunch of science fiction films in the last week that were blind spots for me. And I don't know if that really helped at all. I watched a movie called Endless. I watched a movie called Turbo Kid.
I saw you watching that. I can get your opinion of that movie, to be honest.
Oh my goodness, that is a great movie if you're wanting to do a crappy movie night with your friends and just make fun of it the entire time. That movie is off the chain.
That sounds like every movie commentary we've ever done.
If you guys haven't done a movie commentary for Turbo Kid, you should add that to the queue.
You just made the list.
We might have to do a double feature of that and Hobo with a Shotgun, maybe.
Right.
Oh,
exactly.
I like it. I like it already.
So plans are being made here. So, all right, without too much further ado, we're going to just kind of go round robin here. We're going to let Matt and DJ give us their number 10. Then I'll go, and then Dan will go, and we'll keep going around until we all get to our number 1s. We'll probably take a break about halfway through. So let some ads play for some of our podcast friends, including DJ and Matt. And then, like I said, towards the end, we'll give some honorable mentions and just kind of some general thoughts as it may be. So, all right, let's start it off. DJ and Matt, what is your 10th best science fiction fantasy film from the last decade?
You want to go number? You want to go evens or odds?
I'll go evens.
You go evens?
I'll go evens.
Okay. So you're gonna let me be number 1 then, or
be
we can
number
both
1.
Be number 1.
Be number 1.
Okay,
we're debating here. Number 10 is one of the ones we had in common. We both had it low, but not because we didn't like it, just because we kind of thought it was in the right spot, which is Attack the Block 2011. Nice. I saw this film very recently. I think I saw it maybe a week and a half ago, and it's one of the 2 films that we had in common. But it was it is known for being the film that put John Boyega on the map, and I was glad to see when I was watching it that all the hype was worthy of it. Because I kept hearing, you haven't seen Attack the Block? Come on, man, you gotta watch Attack the Block. I was like, okay, I'll sit down and watch it because we're in a pandemic right now. So I sat down and watched it, and I was like, this movie is excellent. The characters are great. The creature design's great. The concept is great. I hate the fact that it ends in a way that begs for a sequel, and we still haven't gotten one. But I just think that in terms of making a concept that alien invasion, and just sticking it in the slums of London with these kids, I thought it was just a really cool thing. And I think Joe Cornish, I guess, is the director of this.
Joe Cornish, yeah.
Yeah. Is this his best film? I got to go through his filmography, but I think it's still.
He doesn't have a big filmography. It's this and some other movie.
This and something else.
So if anything, he's at a 50% clip. So I mean, that's good.
Right.
So I mean, or cricket. I guess in England they play cricket. They don't play baseball. So
Right. Or right now they don't play anything. So
yeah.
Matt, what did you think of it? What was kind of your pulling factor on Attack the Block?
I mean, I thought it was interesting and different. I mean, this started, of course, to DJ's point, John Boyega, before John Boyega really was anything. At least to Americans, he wasn't anything. He wasn't a big star. Nobody knew he was going to turn into a star.
Right.
But it's fun because it takes that sly, dry, like, Guy Ritchie wit a little bit to it, but then adds that sci-fi element, and it's got, I always forget who's Edgar Wright's partner in crime all the time. The big
Frost and Simon Pegg.
Yeah. Simon Pegg. Who's the other guy? Nick Frost. Sorry, I apologize. So it has Nick Frost as a drug dealer, which I always appreciate. And I mean, if you want to get into a whole metaphor about his name, like his name is Moses and this and that, he's like the Moses of the projects and stuff like that. We're not here to get into that political debate. We're just here to talk about a kick-ass sci-fi movie that was put out 10 years ago. This movie's 10 years old. It's crazy. This was the beginning of the decade. And
from early on, it has a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes.
It's just fun. It's a fun friggin' movie, and I'm glad we can agree on something, DJ.
Sorry. All right, I'm sorry.
I hear it's going to happen one more time, so we'll see. We'll hold
one more time. We're going to disagree for the rest of the time.
Dan, I don't know if you're going to hold off thoughts or if you're going to chime in. This was number 6 on your...
Yeah, it's funny because it's actually my number 10 as well. So great minds think alike, I guess. So what I loved about it too, it reminded me of, I mean, there's a lot of, Goonies, things of that nature, but those types of movies you'd watch as a kid in the afternoon because it was like that or some awful infomercial. So you just stuck with the movie. And like it started at something, but then by the end of it became something completely different. And like, it seemed like this, movie about kids in a city, and suddenly it eventually becomes this science fiction alien film. And it's just by having that, by letting that setting sit in and if it gives it more of a real feel to it, you feel like you can relate to these people dealing with this crazy situation. And the character design, like the all black aliens, they look really weird and different. I feel like that's one thing that has been lacking in a lot of monster movies and things like that, even good monster movies, that the creatures designs leave a lot to be desired. We're here, obviously talking about low budget, very low, a lower budget film compared to other films on this list, but I think they made the most with what they had. And Joe Cornish, who did direct it, he just came out with a movie I think last year, which I haven't seen. The Kid Who Would Be King. I heard it was actually a pretty good.
Oh yeah,
it was decent.
That movie. Yeah, it was okay.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I've heard it was a pretty good kids movie of that ilk as well, but directed much to a younger audience. But I would love a sequel to Attack the Block. It does I think warrant that. Maybe with John Boyega being a bigger star now, it's something he could push forward. And I do think Joe Cornish showed a lot with this, and hopefully he'll. I don't know what took so long. What took nearly 8 years to make another movie. But it's a system sometimes, I guess. But anyways, yeah, Attack the Block's a lot of fun. It's a good, enjoyable adventure science fiction film, especially for anyone who grew up in the 80s. I think would appreciate it and have a lot they can relate to.
This is still a blind spot for me, so I need to catch up with this one. I didn't have time to watch it this last week, but I grew up in the 80s, so it sounds like it's something up my alley. So I'll have to put that on the list to watch real soon. For my number 10, I'm going to go to, I guess, my introduction to a director that seemed like he took over the decade in a way, kind of bookended it at the beginning and at the end. And that's Bong Joon-ho. Obviously has been in the news a lot with Parasite, and he's had, a handful of films over the course of the decade, but I'm going to go with one that really opened my eyes to him. And that was back in 2013, with Snowpiercer. I know it's a TV series now. I haven't seen that. I don't know if it's good or not. But I just remember being kind of blown away by the movie. It wasn't something that I had any expectations going in. This is starring Chris Evans, Tilda Swinton, Octavia Spencer, Ed Harris, amongst others. And I just really appreciated kind of on two levels. One was the more social political commentary that Bong Joon-ho is making through the movie, but you can also just kind of view it as this, science fiction adventure almost, or action set piece type thing. And I like kind of the closed setting, that we're just dealing with what's going on this individual train, so to speak. And I've been wanting to watch it again. I was hoping to kind of rewatch it going into this list so I can kind of solidify some thoughts, and I hadn't had a chance to do that. So it's been quite a number of years since I've seen it, but just the memory of what impact it had when I watched it and kind of how it opened my eyes to this director, etc., was enough for me to kind of slide it in here at the number 10 spot. Matt, DJ, Dan, any thoughts on Snowpiercer?
Do you prescribe to the Willy Wonka theory?
I see. I was about to just say that. Do you prescribe to the
knew
Willy
you were gonna
Wonka
ask
theory?
that. I feel like I was going to beat you to that question.
Yeah, there's the theory that the Snowpiercer is a futuristic spin-off, or I guess
A sequel
to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Which,
Really?
if it is, that's awesome. If it's not, it's still awesome. The movie's great. Chris Evans, that might be one of the greatest Chris Evans performances. And I don't know, he's not like known for great dramatic acting, but like I'm not going to spoil the speech he gives near the end of the movie about food. It is very like heartbreaking and wrenching, and I would love to know like how Bong Joon-ho got to cast him. Like, where did he see in Chris Evans to get him? Because I think he was perfect for the role. And the weirdness of the Tilda Swinton, who every time she shows up is amazing. John Hurt, Ed Harris, who's awesome always. So yeah, I really like Snowpiercer. The only thing that bugs me is just like, man, it Bong Joon-ho really likes to kick you in the balls with his endings. It's like, hey, feeling good about yourself? No.
Don't feel good about yourself. Has anybody seen the TV series at all?
Yeah, DJ has, I think.
I saw like a little bit of it. It's like a police drama on the train. I'm good. The least I'm just gonna imagine that it doesn't exist, and I'm just gonna stick with the movie. I love the movie.
It's Snowpiercer SVU.
Yeah, exactly.
More criminal.
Christopher Maloney shows up somewhere.
It's more Snowpiercer CI.
Yeah, it's more like NCIS Snowpiercer. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds bad. All right. Dan, any thoughts on Snowpiercer before we get to the number 9 picks?
Yeah, I do really enjoy the comic as well. It's based off of
Nice.
French comic, I believe.
Yeah.
It's it's like an international film, Korean director, French comic, American cast, and it all kind of works out because obviously the political message is there, but I just love the set design in that too. Something to take in, because with each section being its own little kind of world, and the action in that is also really well directed. But yeah.
All right, let's go to DJ and Matt for their number 9 pick.
Number 9, I got the odd picks.
I'll have to remember to call you Matt when I say the odds.
Yeah, the odd
Help
one.
you out.
Man. So I forget. We didn't have this on our list collectively, did we? I don't think we did.
No. You had one, and I had another of similar ilk.
It's similar ilk. Okay, so we go from, I guess, the projects to now we go to space in the, I guess, true sci-fi fashion, if you will. And DJ and I had a little bit of kind of going back and forth on this one a little bit, but we finally decided 9 was a good place for it, mainly because of, I guess we kind of decided its place in the pantheon of probably sci-fi in the past decade, all of what it proved that sci-fi can be in a lot of ways. So we're going with number 9, Alfonso Cuarón. We're going with Gravity, Academy Award winner, our first Academy Award winning film on the list. So
also from 2013, same year as Snowpiercer.
Boom, there you go. See, got so much in common right now. It's excellent. But I had some trepidation on this because, I mean, I feel like this film, at least for me, DJ would probably disagree, or he might agree. Who knows? I feel like this is a film best suited for a theatrical environment and theatrical kind of experience. I mean, I haven't seen it since the theater, so I can't really attest to it, but I need an all immersive kind of feeling for this film. But for what it did and what it did to me in the theater so long ago, 7 years ago, Jesus Christ, 7 years ago, I'm getting old. It was incredible and intense and everything I wanted in a true space film in a lot of ways. And it didn't really beat you over the head with the whole 2000. I know everybody wanted to compare it. Oh, 2001, 2001, 2001. It didn't have that beating you over the head type of like theology behind it. It was in a lot of ways a woman trying to survive space on her own without the help of anybody in a lot of ways. And just the immense darkness and helplessness, and made you feel dark and helpless in the theater too. So for its merit as just a technical aspect, 9 I think is a pretty good spot for it, to be honest.
Dan, I'm going to go to you first because I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are. We both had this at number 7 on our half-decade list. Did it? Is it sticking around, and you're going to wait to talk about it, or did it not quite make your countdown this time?
It made my countdown. I'll just talk about it now since we're on it. With it's on my number 8, so it's not that far off. And I agree with Matt with talking about being in the film experience and in the theater. We're obviously in a weird time right now where who knows what that's leading. But I do think like this was a movie that was certainly made to be experienced in that setting. And I'm not a person who loves 3D or feels it's needed, but I do think Gravity was an instance where they did as best you could do with that method than any film, maybe even Avatar, which of course made it infamous. And I almost debated like, does this even count as science fiction? Because it's obviously not real, but it's much more close to reality than other sci-fi films. But it's spectacle, I thought, with purpose. And within this, just in Sandra Bullock too gets a lot of credit because she's mostly by herself for the majority of it. Just being the basically nearly all CGI outfit, just trying to make everything work as much as she can. And it is a thrill ride, but I do feel like being this like real-time exercise was kind of a directorial feat. And just behind the scenes too, when you see like everything they did to make this movie work, again, this could have even qualified for like animated film with how much was actually animated within everything. But yeah, I love it then. I still enjoy it now. I was happy to see it in the theater a few times. I still think though, even without that, you can still enjoy it at home, but it's just not exactly the same.
Yeah, like I said, it was number 7 on my half-decade list. It just slipped out of my list this time, but I don't think that's anything negative against it. I think that's just a testimony to how many great science fiction and fantasy films we had in this last decade. I think it's definitely worthy of being in the discussion with all of the films that we're probably going to mention here from the way on out. Very unique film and definitely an experience that I think everybody should watch at least once. So I have no problem with it being talked about here for sure. For my next one, for my number 9, I actually just rewatched this just to make sure I wasn't just living off of the memories. And this is going to be from 2016. With Gravity, we had 2013 go up a few years here for maybe one that wouldn't be on most people's list, but I just really enjoyed this film. I enjoy films that have a very small or enclosed setting, very limited cast. It's usually something that I gravitate towards, and you definitely get both of those with 10 Cloverfield Lane from 2016. And John Goodman, good Lord, just give me more films of him because I think he's not talked about enough, not cast enough. I think he's a gem. And I like a film like this where you're never quite sure. It doesn't reveal itself, so to speak, and you're not quite sure what is the real, circumstances that this film is taking place on. Like, is he justified in his fear? Is there really something going on outside of this bunker? Is he just making it up because he's a crazy person? And what can you believe? What can't you believe? Kind of like almost like when you have a narrative or narrator that you can't trust, kind of like that type of setting. So I just think the suspense that this one had was well earned, and I enjoyed the performances, like I said, especially from John Goodman. And I don't necessarily care for the other parts of this franchise, if you want to call it that.
You don't like Paradox?
I think that you can like ignore those and just take this one for what it is on its own, and it's just as affecting. So I love 10 Cloverfield Lane. DJ, Matt, thoughts?
I remember being scared to death of John Goodman in Barton Fink and in Raising Arizona, and then he kind of became this lovable guy.
What about King Ralph?
King Ralph came along, and I was like, "Oh my God, there goes terror!" And then he became a lovable guy again. And then I was like, "I don't think he could ever scare me again." Then I see this movie, I'm like, "Oh, there it is. There's the scary. I don't know what this guy's gonna do, John Goodman." That I mean, they play it to comedic effect in Big Lebowski, but in here it's just like you don't know what's going to set him off, and he plays it so well. I remember watching it when I saw this movie, and I was like, he has to get nominated for this because this is like so good. And I think I got caught up in the shuffle because it came out so early. But he is the reason to watch that movie. And the only reason I take points away from it is because this, painted the Cloverfield name on it when it was originally not a Cloverfield movie. To just say, what is connected to Cloverfield?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
If it would have just, if I wish it would have just came out by itself, and I think it'd have probably gotten more acclaim because you're making a franchise movie, you're already going to lose like half of the arty farty critics. But if it would just came out as almost like a post-apocalyptic survival movie, I think we would have seen more of John Goodman. But anybody who sees this movie, love it or hate it, know that John Goodman is excellent in it.
Yeah, for sure. And did get a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, so still fairly well received there. Matt, any thoughts before I swing it over to Dan?
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, to DJ's point as well, I got caught in the franchise. I mean, I wish this was called just like The Bunker or something like that. I mean, it could be just something called so easily, but we know how Bad Robot and Paramount or whoever did this. Who was it? Fox? Paramount?
That might be
Paramount. Probably it was probably those jerks. So they're like, oh, we gotta have a franchise. We have this found footage film. Now we need to have the tie-in that finally brings it all together. But yeah, I think John Goodman's great. I think Mary Elizabeth Winstead is really great in as well too. And the guy who looks like Quicksilver. That's not
from Newsroom. Yeah,
he looks like Quicksilver a lot, though. Come on, let's all be honest with each other.
On Westworld for a little bit this season.
Okay. That guy, that white guy, the other white guy in the bucket.
The other guy.
But it was very like, it was tense, and I went to the theater and saw it. I was like, oh, I'm really enjoying this film. But it's like, oh, how are we going to tie this movie in at the end? And I think that's, I think we saw more of that at the second half of the decade, where it's like, how many franchises can we fit into all these movies and everything? If this was made earlier in the decade, I feel like there would have been a little bit more freedom to have it be like not connected so much. So I mean, I like that. I like this film a lot, but at the same time, I think those franchise issues kind of get under my craw a little bit. But other than that, it's
you were correct.
Film.
It was Bad Robot and Paramount.
Yeah.
Dan, your thoughts on 10 Cloverfield Lane or your number 9 pick?
Yeah, I definitely enjoy it. It's kind of a shame that when you realize that John Goodman's never been nominated for an Oscar, despite his like amazing career. I thought that would have been the one time he was. I don't know if it was the genre or the fact that it came out so early in the year that he never got that nomination. But I do think, again, talking about, I don't want to spoil it, but I think that not that the ending lost me, but I do think it didn't necessarily end on the highest note and didn't answer its questions in a way that I thought escalated it to being a better film. But everything before that I thought was really well done. But for my number 9, I guess going with a controversial director, with everything that's going on in the world, with the world of Star Wars at least, but not going with his Star Wars film, but going with his film before that, Looper, Rian Johnson's Looper, the time traveling movie with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Bruce Willis. And again, you can argue this is as much as a crime film as it is a science fiction film. And time travel is hard. It's hard to do well. It's easy to kind of get lost in the muck of everything and lose your own logic. I think Looper does it really well, setting up this world, not getting too much caught into everything. They have that great scene at the diner where they're talking about, like, you can't get into time travel. You'll be, building diagrams with straws, and it just all doesn't make sense. The more you try to explain it, often the less things make sense. But I do think Rian Johnson deserves some sort of award to getting Bruce Willis to care again for this movie, which is not something he does very often, every now and again, but easily, probably, I would say the best performance he had of the entire decade, working next to Joseph Gordon-Levitt. And never thought you would have him as a younger version of Bruce Willis, but with the help of some makeup, it does work. It does take a little bit getting used to, but once you get there, but also has to be one of the greatest scenes of the year, where you see basically what happens with the I'll just say the disappearing limb scene, as things just kind of get worse and worse and worse. That was a haunting imagery, and that's what I did like about it. How it did take the time travel idea and do different and new things, and not get kind of stuck in what we've seen before. So yeah, that's why I enjoyed. I do know the middle is it loses some people because it does slow down a bunch and it becomes a completely different movie. But I thought it worked. It's a mixture of a lot of different things, even including some like heavy anime references in there as well. But I thought it all worked in the end. So it's my number 9.
Definitely well received, 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it was very well represented on our half-decade list. I had it at my number 10 spot on that list, and Dan, you and Hyro both had it at your number 4. So definitely a lot of love for Looper. DJ, what are your thoughts on Looper or Matt?
Yeah, I think Dan hit it out of the park with this is you said this is the last time Bruce Willis ever gave a crap about a movie.
Yeah, one of them.
I mean, yeah, the other than the limb scene that I love is there's a montage showing the patches of time between Joseph Gordon-Levitt to Bruce Willis, and I think without any dialogue whatsoever, it's just with a score and just clips. And I was like, that is when Ryan Johnson does that, I think he, without any franchises hovering above his head, he's really, 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 really good. And I think that stuff, the way that movie's put together. The twists of the movie you kind of don't even see coming, especially the major one. And you get really good performances pretty much out of everyone, including child actor who terrifies the living shit out of me. Where I did not. This child actor does a thing at the end of the movie where you're like, wow, that it was just a face. And you're like, wow, that is a very good. I know exactly what this kid is thinking, and it's just pure terror. So yeah, I really like Looper. It's like this is the movie that made me go, "Oh wow, he's good in Star Wars. Great!" I was so happy.
And then he got Star Wars, and everybody was pissed.
He got Star Wars,
and everybody's. I mean, it goes to show you, it's like between this, Brick, and Knives Out. When you give Ryan Johnson reign to, I mean, well. Based on the what the opinion of everybody has like Last Jedi and stuff like that, I guess I can't say he's batting 1,000, but I mean between his 3 other films that everybody's like, wow, this guy's really good, this guy's a wonder kid. I mean, he's good at building his own worlds that he wants to build without the constraint of somebody telling him that he has to build the worlds the way he wants to, or he builds a world the way he wants to and everybody's like, you suck, I hate you. So go figure, right?
Yeah. All right, DJ, what is your guys' number 8?
I think Matt, I'm gonna negotiate with you here because I'm looking at our list and all the evens that are left are movies that you wanted, and all the odds that are left are ones that I wanted.
Switch through.
So you can do number 8.
You didn't send me your list. I only have my list. I don't have your list.
No, trust me. Number 8 is a movie that you wanted that's on the list.
You're a cagey little guy.
You know cagey vet, you know what I'm saying?
Cagey vet. You're a cagey boy. So should I take this one then?
You go ahead and take this one. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going back to back and then you're going odd then?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sounds like a plan. All right. Well, we're staying in space. Picture this, folks.
Love this already.
Academy Award winning writer is in space. He's left in space and he's forced to dig around in people's poop. That's the best part of the film. Well, there's a lot of great parts of this film. But number 8, we're going with The Martian because The Martian is tons of fun. And you know what? In this dark, pathetic, abysmal, crappy world, shitty world that we're in right now, watching this film again with my wife, no less, it showed me the true power of getting together and for a common goal for one white man.
What? Wait. I want to switch back. Let's go back to evens. I'll be even.
Anyway, no.
No, I'm joking.
I'm being cheeky, of course, but The Martian is fun. It's got tons of actors in it. I mean, Ridley Scott must have a
zillion actors.
He must have broken the damn bank for this because he hired everybody and everybody who wanted to be in a movie. He's like, you want to be? Hey, Mike, you want to be in a movie with me? It's like, yeah, I'll be in a movie with you. So
there's like 5 MCU actors in this movie.
There's everyone in this movie. It's fantastic. And as silly as it kind of gets with the whole pseudoscience of like launching somebody into lower lower. I don't know how space works or how astrodynamics work or how astrophysics or low orbit of planets that are light years away from us. I don't know, but you know what? I enjoyed it, and it was fun. And this movie was really, really good time. And I don't care how long it was, like 2.5 hours, but it brings me a little bit of, a little heart. There's a lot of heart in this movie, and it's fun. So, Martian number 8 for us.
For my number 8, I wanted to switch roles and go to a comedy, so I also went with The Martian.
Ooh, for number 8, really?
Look at that.
Whoa, I feel like the Academy called it a comedy, so we'll go with
Golden
that.
Globes gave it the greatest comedy of the year.
So no, but
how we placed this movie, I don't know.
This movie was a lot of fun, regardless of how comedic or not it was. But musical or comedy, I guess, is what it was called. But no, Matt Damon's fantastic. Though obviously it has a huge cast, but I don't know. I know, Dan, you talked about this a lot in the year that it came out. 2015. I think this was your number 1 film in that year. So obviously you're probably in agreement here. But there's a lot to love about this film, whether it's some of the more dramatic beats or some of the more action beats or some of the just kind of seeing Matt Damon kind of solo and what he's doing to survive and things like that. So yeah, I agree with you guys. I think this is a lot of fun. I think it's definitely deserving to be in the conversation. 91% on Rotten Tomatoes and one of the best science fiction films of the decade. Dan, are we going to hold off on your thoughts on this one, or?
I'll just go now. It's my number 5, but I'll just just add into the love pile of The Martian. As you mentioned, it was my number 1 film that the year it came out in 2015, and it just really struck a chord with me because it's just really, really smart people solving really complex problems in really interesting ways, and it just I feel like a lot of times, even like talking about Looper or science fiction films that take place in the future, it's often very dystopian, or it just makes you concerned with what's to come. The Martian, I felt like, is one of the few science fiction films that came out this decade that was optimistic in a way, and had it showed the power of the human mind, what it can accomplish even in the most unusual circumstances with limited resources, and the fact that it does. I don't know where it falls into the Neil deGrasse Tyson barometer of reality or whatever, but I do think compared to most science fiction films, I think it tried to stay the course as much as possible. I know a lot of people done different analysis, and a lot of people have analyzed the film to see what's real, what would really happen when I know the book itself that it's based on is quite well renowned as well, and I do think it shows you when really Ridley Scott gets a good script, he can still make great films. I know he had an up and down decade, but it doesn't even feel like really Ridley Scott movie. It feels much more modern, in the sense that it's very much of the now. Like you would feel like this is a movie made by an up and coming director, not a guy who's been directing for 30-40 years or so. And Matt Damon is Matt Damon. He's charismatic. He holds, he makes it all work. It does, I think, suffer from some aspects of being some typical tropes and things like that. Jeff Daniels' character, for example, but I don't know. To me, what works with it, I think it's just that the spirit of the film carries it through for me, even if it maybe not be as well made or as groundbreaking as other films in the genre for this decade. That's what made it so high for me. That's why it was number 5 for me.
Awesome. So a universal agreement here on The Martian. DJ, that brings it back to you for your number 7.
I'm going to go with a movie called Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, 2014. Not only there's this special effects in this movie freak me out how realistic they look, and they still hold up today. Andy Serkis, the great Andy Serkis, brings like this real emotion to these creatures, and unlike some other sci-fi films that get away from title characters in order to focus on humans, Godzilla, Transformers, Dawn actually focuses on the freaking apes the entire time.
Yes. Humans
are there, but they are the co-stars. They're barely, Jason Clarke is there, but he's kind of just, he's not this. It's about Caesar, Rocket. It's about the tragedy of those two characters, and that's another great thing about this movie is that you see that in the beginning how Rocket and Caesar are brothers, and how this one fundamental thing breaks them apart in a realistic way. Rocket is not evil for evil's sake. Rocket has a reason, and which is built up from the first, from Rise of the Planet of the Apes, is when they introduced Rocket, and you see in that speech he gives them about human work, you kind of feel for him, like he has a point. Not like, the way he implements it is really, really, really terrifying, but he is traumatized, and you see that dynamic. And then you realize 2 hours in that you're really focusing on these two CGI characters talking, and there's scenes where Caesar is talking to his son, and it's making you cry, even though you're an old man like myself watching the movie, crying like, oh my God, why is this monkey making me cry? It doesn't make any sense. But yeah, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, I think, is one of the best in the entire franchise, and that's saying a lot with Charlton Heston and all that stuff. But and this is kind of the first time I ever saw Matt Reeves. I think I saw Let the Right One In. Was it Let Me In? That whatever remake he did. I saw that after this one.
Yeah.
Let Me In.
Yeah, Let Me In with Chloe Grace Moretz, which I love.
Yeah, I saw that after this one. So yeah, this was kind of my introduction to him. I heard he was getting Batman. I was like, well, if it looks anything like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, I'm in. Let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah, Planet of the Apes was well represented in the half-decade list as well. Hyro had this Dawn of the Planet of the Apes at his number 8 at the half-decade mark. I had just Planet of the Apes at number 2 for me last time at the half-decade mark, because I refused to distinguish between Dawn and Rise at the time, and now we've had War added to it. And I had to make a rule for myself this time that I could only have one of those represented. Otherwise, all 3 of them probably could have snuck into my list, because I love that trilogy so much. But I have Dawn this year. I'll speak now, but I have it at my number 4. It was the one that I singled out of the 3 of them. War has the highest Rotten Tomatoes score at 94. Dawn has a 90, and Rise has an 82. Not that Rotten Tomatoes means everything. It's just one of the references that I have here. But for Dawn, like you're talking about with the human work and with the really the interactions between the actual apes, I think was at its peak here in the middle segment of this trilogy, which is kind of odd. I think, in trilogies, usually a lot of people gravitate towards the first or the third one, and I feel like the second one here might have been the strongest one. So I can rewatch this every time I can show this trilogy to somebody who hasn't seen any of the Planet of the Apes movies. I jump at that chance, because universally, I don't think I've ever had anybody disappointed when they've watched these films with me. So, and they're each just enough different too, that they kind of give you a little bit of a different feel and a different effect on you. I think they did a kind of a nice job distinguishing a different ethos to each one of the 3 films. So it's my number 4. I love this trilogy. I could talk about it all day, but I won't. So that will take. I'll have Dan. I'll have you do your number 7, and then I'll bounce back at my number 7.
Okay, my number 7 is such a beautifully horrific movie. I don't know how to. Those aren't words that make sense.
That sounds good.
I like it.
If I know I was going to have an Alex Garland movie on my list. I just didn't know which one. But I'm going to go with Annihilation. Just because I remember going into this, I was concerned it wasn't going to work. It's based upon this novel, which was supposed to be unfilmable. It was weirdly delayed. Like, it was supposed to come out, and then it just seems like they were shelving it, and it seemed like a lot of concerns of like, okay, maybe this movie isn't that good, and then you watch it and you're like, wow, this is just a brilliant take on science fiction. It is gorgeous at times. It is horrific at times. It's one of the scariest movies of the year. There's so much you can take out of it. I think a lot of people's interpretations of it will be very different depending upon who you are. I think many of them are legitimate, but it's confusing in a way, but never to the point where it hinders your experience with the film. And it's just also packed with just strong performances. Natalie Portman, of course, being the lead, but throughout, this group of female actors were phenomenal on it. And just again, Alex Garland kind of playing with the genre. Not a huge high budget, but doing with great things with what he could. And obviously the bear scene is probably one of the moments that will haunt me forever. And that again, talking about creature design is it is crazy to see. But then realizing it as you're going further and further into this film, what it's really representing, and it has those moments, but there's just a lot to take out on a philosophical standpoint as well, and as an emotional standpoint, and identity of being a huge part of what this movie represents. So yeah, I think I almost put this higher. I struggled with it, but I do think I've only seen it once, and I feel like if I've seen it again, I would probably enjoy it. It's just, I know, one of those watches that takes a lot out of you. So
yeah, that's for sure. I did have it slightly higher, but only by one. I had it at my number 6. And I agree with everything you said. And I think science fiction, almost more than any other genre over the decades, over the years, has been one that's not afraid to center their movie and their stars around a female cast. I think that's one thing that science fiction tends to do better than a lot of the other genres. And you're right, we do get a fantastic female cast with Natalie Portman, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Gina Rodriguez, Tessa Thompson, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, really, Oscar Isaac is about the only male of note in this entire film for the most part. And I love everything Alex Garland does, and this is no exception. I think this was a phenomenal science fiction film. It's listed as a science fiction psychological horror film. I think it fits all of those descriptions. So I love Annihilation, but like you, I do need to see it again. It's just like, also like you said, it's a hard one just to pop in and say, hey, let's watch this real quick. But
let's sit down and watch Annihilation.
But I'm in agreement, Dan. I think this is definitely worthy of being in the discussion. Matt or DJ, thoughts on Annihilation?
I'll just say really quick to the cast. Gina Rodriguez is my favorite part of the film. Her scenes with the bear and everything, that whole bear scene with her, it is super intense. It shows just the mental breakdown, the emotional breakdown of probably not only what she's going through, because you do find out some snippets what's going on in everybody's life, but I feel like her arc is probably the most dynamic, and then it's capped off by just the emotional stress of what's going on in this how would you call it? I don't want to call it soap dish, but in a lot of ways it just looks like a giant soap bubble in a lot of ways, if you want to get, with the whole shimmer and stuff like that. But everybody's really great in this film. I remember watching this in the theater with my wife, and she was like, "What the fuck is going on here?" I'm like, "I don't know either. Nobody knows what's going on here. It's fine." It's but at the end of the day, it was just very interesting. The soundtrack adds to that, like, just existential, just like creepiness and ickiness you get through the whole thing too. And I don't know, it's intriguing, and I would love for them to do more, because it's based on the whole Sci-Fi trilogy book and everything. If they didn't want to get more into it, they could, but who knows if we'll ever get more, because guess what, folks? This movie did not make enough money for it to warrant a sequel, sadly. And I'll leave it at that for me.
All right, DJ, any thoughts before I reveal my number 7?
I refuse to watch this movie. No, I have not seen it yet.
Okay.
I've seen bits and pieces. I saw the bear scene, and I almost pissed myself. So I was like, I don't know if this movie's for me. I'm a huge Alex Garland fan, but this movie is the blind spot you were talking about before. It's just like, I've seen all these scenes out of context. I think I got to one day just sit down and watch it, because I told you that bear is nightmare fuel forever. I don't want to know. I don't know what the hell was going on. I just saw a creature that will haunt me for the rest of my life.
Fair enough. All right. For my number 7, I'll go with another A film, and that is from 2016, possibly higher on some of your guys' list, maybe. I don't know, but I'm going with Arrival for my number 7 from Denis Villeneuve. This movie is a mind bender of all kinds of sorts. I like a film that has that lasting impact, where you can have continuous conversations and you can reveal more stuff is revealed. The more you talk about it, the more you watch it again, and there's just constantly more stuff to kind of like consider from different perspectives and different points of view, and kind of what it all means, etc. And I like a sci-fi to be, I like some sci-fi films to be thinkers, and I think this is one of those. Obviously, Amy Adams is fantastic. Jeremy Renner is good as well, and I think this epitomizes the genre. Like, if you're thinking science fiction films, like, this checks all of the boxes for me. So Arrival from 2016 is my number 7. Matt, Dan, or DJ, any thoughts?
I really like the fact that it really got into the you watch all these alien movies, it's from
Mhm.
Star Trek on down, and it's like the aliens are talking to humans like this all willy nilly, and this whole movie is about communication. That's essentially
Right.
what it is,
Mm.
and the way they communicate is crazy. I feel bad for Amy Adams because she'll probably she keeps coming out with these great performances that nobody freaking cares. Not nobody cares about, but like she doesn't win for. And this was one of them where I was like, man, when I was watching in the theater, I was like, well, she's definitely going to get something for this.
Right.
Sorry,
The
It's
wrong
like, damn it.
genre. Sorry.
Yeah, got a
yeah.
Golden Globe nomination for it, but the Oscars left her. Even though the Oscars had give it 8 other nominations, none of them for Best Actress.
So I understand when she got snubbed for the Oscars, they're like, damn, they're against you for you must have done something. I don't know what you did, but they're against
American
you for
Hustle
some reason.
put her under the
Oh,
thumb.
jeez.
And I love American Hustle, so sue me, whatever.
Dan, any other thoughts? Or
Yeah, so Arrival was actually my number 3, so I'll just talk about it since
Okay.
we're already on it. It again, it's an alien invasion film that we've seen time and time again, but it's all like DJ said, it's all about a conversation. It's all about communication, understanding language, which is such an important part of our life, that language and time and how they relate to one another. And I think it may have arguably perhaps one of the best endings of the entire decade of last decade, and how it just adds this emotional core to this film. And it helps explain what's going on in a way that kind of connects all the pieces. It recontextualizes everything that you've seen before, but it also just again it hits with a like, oh, this is what's happening, and makes you kind of realize there's a, I don't even think bittersweet's the right terminology, but it's just amazing that the movie was made at the budget it was. I think was really successful. It was a gorgeous looking film as well, and it gets into kind of the power of loss and love, and having to make like what it would be the ultimate choice, an impossible choice to make. But I love that dilemma. Like good drama comes from creating and crafting dilemma that you can kind of debate about and never really come to a conclusion about what you would do. And I thought the ending for this kind of brought that full for sure. So that's why it's so high up on my list. I think I've even enjoyed it more since I've originally seen it, being able to watch it again and kind of understanding where it's going and realizing that okay, we're picking up on so much more. It is one of those films that rewards rewatching. So
absolutely. Matt, this time number 6. I think that's what we're doing.
We flipped it on you, man.
Yeah.
Now I'm odd,
baby.
now. Or now I'm even, baby. Okay. I don't think DJ and I were on the same wavelength on this one, but I love this film because it is so.
I love this film too. Come
Dude,
on, I love this film.
I don't know where. Okay, we'll have to talk about this where you had it on your list at the end, maybe. But this film is amazing, and dare I say it's our first love story of the film of the whole list. It might be our first love story, our first romantic offering, romantic sci-fi offering, erotic romantic sci-fi offering.
We just crossed a different level there.
Slow down.
Well, I mean, DJ loves this probably be for different reasons, but maybe we're on the same page. But number 6 for us, collectively decided, Under the Skin, by Jonathan Glatzer, is our number 6. This film is out of this world in a lot of ways. It is, dare I say, it's Scarlett Johansson's best role she's had. I mean, I like her in a
I'd
lot
argue that, but she's freaking phenomenal.
She's really phenomenal in this, and it's so weird and out there. And again, the music. I mean, you think I love the music in Annihilation? I love the music in this one. It is so dark and weird and crazy and sexy and odd and spacey and erotic and everything else. I mean, it's basically Scarlett Johansson putting on people's skin and sucking their life away into a giant void for love, because she wants to be loved. That's all she wants to be, is loved. Isn't that all we want to be at the end of the day, is loved? Even when you're an alien from whatever planet she is, because we don't know what planet she's from.
It does.
But yeah. But this movie, I mean, I guess I hate to be cheeky, but it gets under your skin because it's very unnerving the way she basically just it's very Hellraiser-y to me in a lot of ways. It kind of reminds me of Frank's character in Hellraiser, trying to, suck the life force out of people to become whole again and everything. I know we crossed a whole different genre, but this film is, I have to watch it again because I haven't seen it in a while, but I remember just being transfixed on the screen with the big black void and just people falling into it as she takes their life away. And at the end of the movie, you feel really bad because, no matter how much she tries to love everybody else, she can't truly love anybody. Maybe it's her DNA, her alien DNA. We don't really know, but it's a very interesting experience to be a part of under the skin.
DJ?
I have one note written down here for this movie,
Oh.
and it's the word creepy. Like, there's scenes in this movie.
Well, we are the one word
show, but yeah.
So.
Matt is right about pretty much everything he says there. I would just attest that I love this movie because of how unnerving it makes you feel. That beach scene, I don't know what it is about that scene. I couldn't sit still in my I was just like, I'm like looking around and it's something about it. The baby left on the beach thing. I couldn't. It's just.
See, I almost forgot about that scene.
Yeah, it invokes emotion out of you, and you're right. At the end, you're kind of like, oh man, she just can't. She wants to kind of cross over to our world, but she can't, and then
she doesn't understand it.
Doesn't get it. And I like the way they filmed it, where Scarlett Johansson apparently was just driving around in a truck, and they were picking up actual people and ad-libbing their conversations and stuff like that. That's the way that this movie's done. Is just creepy. That's by himself is just creepy. I'm just walking in.
It's like Taxi
or something, and Scarlett Johansson picks me up just like a hooker. That's creepy. Asking me questions and then get me naked in the room. It's weird. That's great.
Dan,
Brickian type of movie. I'd say this is if Kubrick would love this type of movie.
Dan, I'm assuming this is on your list as well.
Yeah, I'll save my thoughts on this for later.
All right. I won't share any thoughts because I'm trying to stay positive, and I was very vocal about how negative I was on this film when it came out. So I think this and Birdman were probably my two most vocal negative reactions of the decade. So, Dan, what's your number 6?
My number 6 is also kind of a love story. Well, it definitely involves love, a different type of science fiction film. And to me, maybe the person who had the best decade. It's arguably there's a lot of people who could had a great 2010s, whatever you want to say. But Yorgos Lanthimos, I think, had some of my favorite films of the decade, and one of those being The Lobster, which some may argue isn't really even a science fiction film in a way, but it is, in the sense of you're living in this world in which if you don't get married, you end up having to be turned into the animal of your choosing. And it's one of the driest films I think ever put on screen. Colin Farrell is just brilliant in this movie. One of his best comedic performances. Just this, how everything is just spoken with such a serious tone. It's never in on its own joke. And obviously, when you're watching it, it's saying a lot about kind of the institution of the marriage. But I think it's more than that. To me, it's just how subcultures work, and we're living in a decade where subcultures are becoming more and more prevalent, and just the random rules they place on everyone that kind of make no sense. And then also how subcultures tend to view those that are outside of them as enemies, and kind of the conflicts that ensue in trying to kind of be part of these different worlds, and despite their flaws. But it's just the tone of it is pitch perfect. It's one of the hardest things, I think, in order for this movie to work. I know a lot of people didn't like the second half as much. They loved once he kind of leaves the compound, but I thought, to me, it made the film stronger because it expanded upon its commentary and what it was saying, showing it's not just this movie about why marriage is weird, but it's much more than that. So yeah, that's why it's my number. What are we on, 6 now?
Yeah, 6. All right, so that is our 10 through 6 picks, as well as a few teases into what we have coming up. But we're going to take a quick break. We're going to share some commercials on some podcasts that we think you guys should check out. So please listen to those commercials and stick with us, because we'll be right back after the break.
On the Simplistic Reviews podcast, we talk movies. We talk TV. We talk.
Hello, Julie. What the heck are you doing?
tried to make our spots sound more exciting by adding explosions.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could have got the point across with sound effects, not the real thing.
Download this show on iTunes or at simplisticreviews.blogspot.com.
I'm sure your insurance company will cover that.
No, they won't.
No, they probably won't.
Hello, everyone. This is JD from the In Session Film Podcast. Each week, we review
the latest from Hollywood, California.
Well, yes, Brendan. We also
give top 3 lists.
Okay, yeah. Thanks again, Brendan. Additionally, you can hear us
talk other movie news, trailers, varying movie series, or other interesting film-related topics, and even rants and raves of the week.
On top of our main show, every Friday,
you can also hear our extra film podcasts.
You can listen to the In Session Film Podcast on
iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or at InSessionFilm.com. Listen to the In Session Film Podcast every Monday and Friday. Subscribe today and hear me verbally beat JD like a Cherokee drum.
No. That's not how this works, sir.
All right, thanks for sticking with us. It's time for our 5 through 1 picks for the best science fiction fantasy films of the last decade. We will start with, I cannot remember it anymore. I'm saying it's DJ, and we are going to your number 5 pick. What is
He's
it?
the odd one now.
The odd one out. I'm going to go with number 5. It's the anniversary. It's Inception. I remember walking out of the movie theater, I think it's Westlake Movie Theater in Orlando, Florida, after watching this film, contemplating my own reality. This is the last time I felt that was The Matrix. And I something about that movie, and it's very sci-fi, but then the dream element, I think, is what is the coolest part about that, and the way Nolan executes it in a way where you kind of just buy into everything, and essentially it's Nightmare on Elm Street, but a James Bond version of it. It's fantastic, and it has my favorite Hans Zimmer score of all time. This is kind of what made, I don't say it made Leo a megastar. I guess Titanic did that, but this is kind of like, yeah, Leo, you're not going anywhere anytime soon. I loved it. I think he made this in between Batman movies. This was kind of like his. I got some time to kill. I'll just make Inception. Yeah, and from what the rumors are, is that this might. I hope not, but it might have some connection with Tenet. I hope not, but I just like that whole world. I like Matt knows I hate endings that they don't.
This is about as much as that as it is.
Right, and this is the only one where this and Magnolia are probably the only ones where I'm kind of like, you know what?
I'll give it a pass. It's fine.
You get a furlough. You're good. With the top, because the people have been debating the ending of this movie since it's come out for the last 8 years. Mm-hmm. So, and I just think it's a really, really good movie that I know a lot of people, I think as time has gone by, has kind of started to malign this movie, but I don't care. I watch this all the time. My phone answering ring when alarm clock is the song time at the end where he wakes up in the plane. I love Inception. It's my number 5.
Matt, were you not quite as high, or what were your thoughts on Inception?
I mean, for my personal list, I didn't have this on my list, to be honest with you. But we negotiated, and I
paid him some money.
And I
slid him
paid him
a 50.
Slip me a Mickey, and it was fine. I appreciate this film for its technical merit, kind of similar to how I appreciate Gravity in a lot of ways. This film, in all honesty, I have not seen it since the theater. I don't know, with Nolan films, for me, I feel like it is such I don't want to say it's a chore to watch his films, but there's definitely this aspect of watching either Inception or Interstellar and any of his big brain movies. I mean, me, I'm just a stupid idiot. I mean, in a lot of ways I am, of course. But watching Inception or watching Interstellar is such a emotional drain on my body and soul and mind that I maybe I'm, like I said, maybe I'm an idiot. I can't put these things together. But conceptually, with the idea of, if I'm breaking it down on its base as a film where it's like, let's go into somebody's mind and steal their dreams and steal what's in their head. To me, that's an interesting heist format, and I really like that. But there's all these other things with time and how it's, I guess, relative to Interstellar in a lot of ways, where there's so many stakes, there's so much stuff going on at the same time where I'm like, my brain can't accept all this. I'm being accepted as well, maybe, who knows. But I think for what it's worth, the cast, Tom Hardy's a suave bastard. Leo's really good playing Christopher Nolan, which is always amazing. And overall, I mean, it's a cool film, and I don't want to say it's a blind spot for me, but because I've seen it, but I haven't seen it recently enough to maybe appreciate it potentially.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the ones that I think it's probably going to be the only selection that it gets talked about today from 2010. And I feel like that has almost been its downfall is that it came out that first year. And I think a lot of people have either changed their opinions of it or it's just faded from people's views in a way where it has slipped down on a lot of people. But I'm with DJ. I think just like The Matrix, that this is something that for me almost changed the game when it comes to science fiction. It showed me something that I had never seen before, or in a way that I had never seen it before. So I don't know. I was very impressed by Inception. I think it's something that is still stuck with me. And I am a fan of Christopher Nolan. I do like those think pieces, even if at times I don't understand them as much as I think I should, or it takes rewatches to understand them or things of that nature. But I had it at number 3 at the halfway point, and I still have it at number 3 after the decade's over. So I'm in agreement with you, DJ. I think this is definitely worthy of being in this discussion of top science fiction films.
Thank you, Steve.
You act like I didn't give it like any props or anything like that. Jesus Christ! I said it was good.
I paid you $50. Okay, I want my money back.
Hey,
Dan, you had this at number 5.
Grant was not a good American. Okay, how about that?
There you go. Dan, you had this at number 5 at the halfway mark. You still think that Inception deserves to be kind of discussed in this type of setting?
Yes, certainly. I honestly forgot it came out this decade. Like I felt like it came out like 15 years ago. It's been a long 10 years.
That's for sure.
But it didn't make my top 10 here. But as you mentioned, it didn't halfway through, and I do enjoy it. I mean, the special effects in that are pretty incredible. It's also like Nolan almost trying to do his version of James Bond in a way, especially the snow scenes seems very reminiscent of that. And yeah, he has his fascination with time, as we've seen with a lot of his films. But it works, and I still think the practical effects in that too, that room spinning room sequence is just phenomenal. The Hans Zimmer score, I think I've heard that they're gonna, when theaters open up again, they will be this is one of the films that I'm hearing a lot of people putting back in the theaters again, which would be, I think, fantastic. I would love to see it again in the theater. Because it was a really good experience the first time, and I've seen it a few times, but it's been quite a long time. But yeah, it is weird that it's, I think, because Christopher Nolan's come out with such so many films since then, that maybe it's not as well regarded. It'll be interesting seeing how it relates to Tenet, like in the sense of just quality wise. But yeah.
All right. Fair enough. I will go to my number 5 now. And that is, I guess, one that's just a personal favorite of mine as far as rewatchability and just fun when it comes to science fiction. Like Matt was just talking about, we have like these big, heavy think pieces with like an Inception or an Interstellar, or even what we were talking about with Annihilation or Arrival kind of too. And this one, my number 5 pick just goes back to just plain out fun action science fiction. So I wish they could have decided on a title, but I'll go with either Edge of Tomorrow or Live, Die, Repeat. I don't know what you want to call it. But I just think this one is so much fun. The action is fun. It does have a little bit of thinking as far as the premise of the movie, I guess, but Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt are both fantastic in this. And this one for me has almost endless rewatchability. Came out in 2014. It was actually my number 5 at the halfway point and still is my number 5. I just really have a lot of fun with this film. So I call it Edge of Tomorrow. I don't know what it's technically known as anymore. So DJ, Matt, any thoughts on that one?
I think we're going to save our comment.
Okay.
We have
fair enough.
All
right. Dan, what about you?
5th, if you will.
Yeah, I thought about it. I had it here, but since we're doing an action list, again, I thought of it more of an action film first. At least that's what I enjoy most of
Makes
it. So I figured I'd probably just keep it for that. But yeah, that was, again, one that was really underseen. and did not get the attention it deserved, because it's a really great concept that's executed perfectly.
Yeah, I agree. You had Martian at number 5, which we already talked about. So let's flip it back to DJ and Matt for their number 4 pick.
Number 4. Okay. So to your point, Kev, so now for number 4, we agreed on this, and we're going with just straight up action sci-fi. Turn your brain off. It's kind of funny going from number 5 to number 4, because it's like the complete opposite of what
we just talked about.
So, but hey, we have an actor that's going to be twice on our list. Can you guess who? I guess you can. I'm going to tell you in a minute. Okay. Number 4. Well, no, he's actually in the sequel, so I'm an idiot. But we're going to go number 4. We're going to go Pacific Rim, the OG Pacific Rim, Guillermo del Toro's love fest of everything kaiju and giant robots beating up monsters from the Pacific depths or from another dimension, because it's sci-fi, everybody. This we're watching this movie or seeing this movie in the theater. I remember seeing the trailer first. I was like, oh wow. There's like robots beating up monsters. This is
8-year-old self made a movie.
Yeah, it's like I had a boner. It was like, this is exciting. And this movie is, this is something I go back to the well on, and I'm glad it's something I can also go back to the well on with Nicole, because we both immensely enjoy this film, because it's fun, it's stupid. It raises some interesting concepts where you get a sequel where the sequel is not very good, everybody. Spoiler alert. But the first film is just gigantically fun. It's ridiculous. It's over the top. It's Guillermo del Toro, who is now an Academy Award-winning director. Guess what? He made a movie about monsters punching other monsters in the face while destroying a small city. So, hey, Academy. That's what I think about you. But yeah, Pacific Rim number 4, because it's so fun. It's so damn fun.
DJ?
I'm excited thinking about it right now. It's so fun.
There's some reason about this movie I should hate it. I love it. I don't know what it is. I think it's the part where the fist goes through the building and hits the Newton's cradle and the things move. And it's funny because you just talked about Guillermo del Toro. This is like Guillermo del Toro unleashed. Whatever he wants to do. I want the robots to actually have weight to them, and the fights to feel like an actual fight. This was kind of like a throwback to the Godzilla versus Ultraman kind of. This is my childhood. This is essentially like, if, like I said, my 8-year-old self pitched a movie, it would be this movie. And they don't. I think everybody understood the movie they were in, especially like Idris Elba, who's doing the speech, and they're all. It's just almost like the highest rated B movie maybe of the decade. I love it for that reason, because it knows what it wants. Guillermo del Toro knew what he wanted to make. I think he executed it well, and to prove it, watch the second one. You see how they didn't execute it well at all. So, yeah.
Pacific Rim was number 7 on Fridley Cent's half-decade list. It was number 9 on my half-decade list. Unfortunately for it, the 5 years of movies came out after that on the second half of the decade and just buried this one for me. But it was number 9 on my halfway point. It just fell too much because of all the movies that came out after it. But I do think it's a lot of fun. I think this one does have some rewatchability. And just like Edge of Tomorrow is just one that you can just pop in and get some enjoyment out of as like just a fun action science fiction film. So I have no problem with it being discussed, that's for sure. Dan, thoughts on Pacific Rim?
Yeah, I'll pretty much just echo everything that was said. Again, similar to Edge of Tomorrow, consider more of an action film first. So that's why I was thinking more. If I were to bring it up, it'd be for that list.
Okay.
But I mean, it's kaiju fighting robots. It is exactly what you want it to be in that sense, and well made and great looking robots. I love how the robots themselves have personality. The monsters are well designed, and in how everything plays out. The sequel, I didn't hate. I know a lot of people hated it, but certainly you could tell, there's why it almost makes you look back and realize why Pacific Rim was as good as it was, because in the hands of a better director, that concept is a lot better than someone who's just, I think, trying to, just go through the motions.
Yeah, for sure. My number 4 was already discussed. That was Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. So, Dan, that brings us back to you for your number 4.
My number 4 is also Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. I just started talking about it. Talk about it now. I think the Apes films to me are the best film franchise of the decade, in with their quality. And I think this is the best of the 3. It's monkeys doing Shakespeare, and it works. It's Kobo is probably one of my favorite villains of the decade. You understand his motivations, you get where he's coming from. There's sympathy for him, and the relationship with him and Caesar, it kind of breaks your heart seeing them kind of come into blows like they do, but understanding why they had to. Matt Reeves, I think he doesn't overshow his hand, but there are times where it's like you can see he's a good action director. There's this great moment where in the middle of an action sequence, like you're placed on top of like this turret, and it just, I think, brings everything. It's just a great way to kind of experience that. Action to me, though, is like the least important things of these films. It's just the special effects are, it's advanced. I think everything, just in the eyes too. I remember the first trailer for this, and it just zoomed in on, I believe it was Caesar's eyes, and
the trees with the rain and stuff.
Yeah. And often when it comes to CGI before this, like the eyes is where people try to avoid the most because, people had those dead eyes. It didn't look natural. And this nailed it. And, without that working, without, getting that level of fine detail and being able to make you believe you're looking at an actual ape having a conversation, I don't think, this movie will work nearly as well as it does. And so that's why it's my number 4. Just a fantastic film franchise that I know. I remember when I heard they were coming out with another one, I'm like, why even bother? And Rise, and like, why? Like, just let that die. And then Rise was good. I like Rise. It's a solid film. But this to me just brought it into like an entirely different level. War was good too, but it's not. I think it just doesn't have the emotional impact this one does.
Dawn is Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's why it's my.
Thank you for reminding me, Dan. I fuck up the name. It's Koba, not Rocket. Rocket.
You said Rocket. I was like,
Rocket? I was like, oh, my bad. I got the name.
Is there another monkey called Rocket?
There's another monkey called Rocket. He's actually he's a character in them. I just got them confused. He's on the good side.
Yeah,
and probably the poster child movie for the mocap getting more attention when it comes to.
Yeah, that's the whole argument is behind this movie. That's how good the performance is. It started a debate in the film community about should Circus get something, because I'm feeling things. Why am I feeling things?
And also Toby Kebbell too, who does Koba. Yes. And then when they said he was going to play Dr. Doom, I'm like, oh, that'll work out. And then we got that other movie.
Oh God, I was right there with you, bro. I was right there with you. I was like, well, Koba was awesome. Oh no.
They're going to get a third chance, maybe. So we'll see.
Well, not with him. Not with him.
All right, so that is both Dan and my number 4, which means it's time for number 3 for DJ.
Dun, 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 dun.
My favorite film of 2017 is Blade Runner 2049. This has a special place in my heart because it is the film that finally got the greatest cinematographer of all time, Roger Deakins, an Oscar. The tightrope act we keep talking about Denis Villeneuve, that this guy had to walk, and who's going to continue to walk with Dune, of beloved cult classic, getting back to a beloved cult classic and not dropping the ball for the fans. Must have been, I don't know what goes on to this guy's head, because I was like, after he did this movie, I'm like, okay. And he goes, well, I'm gonna do Dune next. I'm like, are you trying to kill yourself? Are you trying? What is with you, man? But no, I love this movie. I think we're talking about people coming back and giving performances when they usually don't give a crap. Harrison Ford is on that list of people, but when he cares, you can it. And in this movie, you can tell that scene with him and Jared Leto in the room with the lights, and they're explaining Young's character, and you can't see Harrison Ford's face until the light comes back around, and then he's just broken. It's like Harrison Ford's just dropping stuff, and you get a really good performance from Ryan Gosling, who is really, I think, underappreciated for his acting. I think he's really good in this movie. I love this movie, and I understand, along with Inception, I understand where it's not everybody's cup of tea. I mean, put this movie on and mute it. It is every frame is art. Every single frame of it, and a lot of it, you should watch the making of it. A lot of it's practical. Like I thought, like when Ryan Gosling's walking through that killer zone, that was all CGI, and it's not. It's in a studio, and it just made it look orange in there for some. I don't know how the hell Roger Deakins did it. That's why he won the Academy Award. I think this movie, in terms of Blade Runner, one of the most beloved sci-fi films of all time, a really worthy, I think, sequel. Puts it on my list as number.
Yeah, I think for me, the only thing this would be fighting right now for a spot like right between 15 and 20 for me, and that's only because I've only seen it the one time. So I saw it in theaters in 2017, but I haven't had a chance to rewatch it, and it could probably climb. But this was in that group that was kind of fighting for that, possibly fighting for a 10th spot, and it just kind of got bumped a little bit ways down there. But I remember it being beautiful, and I remember enjoying it. But I need to see it again. Matt, your thoughts on Blade Runner?
I mean, to you, to your point, Kevin. I mean, I only saw this in the theater, and I enjoy it. I like the lore. I like the concept of Blade Runner. I like this idea that there's these replicants that you can't tell apart, and there's a police force kind of tasked to rein them in. Which it's kind of funny because it's almost to this point now in time in our world that we're living in. It's policing people that look like us and things like that. It could get political. I'm not going to get political on this, but Gosling is a lot of fun. I really like him a lot. Harrison Ford, it's still ambiguous about what he is and who he is in a lot of ways, which I think is still intriguing to the overall concept and the overall lore of Blade Runner as a whole. I guess if you're a Blade Runner director's cut or Blade Runner Ultimate, how many cuts were there for Blade Runner? Like 900?
3, 4, 5.
Yeah, it all depends which Blade Runner you prescribe to, and then you know whether he's a replicant or not. The whole thing with the origami. But there were parts in this that were very edge of your seat. I mean, Roger Deakins, it's so funny. Roger Deakins has worked his ass off in Hollywood forever. And not saying he doesn't deserve this for Blade Runner 2049. He should have won this like 15 years ago for every other film he ever did.
Skyfall, every Coen Brothers movie he's ever done.
Yeah, but he wins it for Blade Runner 2049, which was kind of the hot thing in 2017. Everybody was going goo goo gaga over it, which is fine. I didn't have it as high as DJ. We compromised on this, but I still find the fact that Denis Villeneuve, depending on how you want to pronounce it, I guess, was able to DJ's point, tightrope a beloved franchise and still make most people happy. I think he's going to be a little bit better off with Dune because everybody laughed at Dune when it came out. People were like, David Lynch, you're a crazy guy. Why are you making this? Because I'm crazy. So now he's going to make Dune and everybody will probably either love it or hate it. I think most people will probably love it because it's, again, Denny's a great director, and he is. I mean, between Arrival, Sicario, Blade Runner 2049, he's kind of in the catbird seat almost. And maybe again with Inception as well, probably just have to rewatch this again. I remember it being beautiful and having very interesting concepts, and the CG was amazing. And just being immersed in the world again was kind of cool. But I mean, it deserves to be in the talk because it was pretty damn important film for the past decade to come out.
And another director to make multiple appearances on the countdown so far today. My number 3 was Inception. That's already been talked about. Dan's number 3 was Arrival. That's already been talked about. So, Matt, right back to you for your guys' number 2.
Hey-oh, we're getting down to nitty gritty. Okay, so I guess this is probably going to bring up debate depending on where everybody stands. Dan's already kind of alluded to where he falls with the sci-fi action genre, and DJ and I had to we compromise. I think this was this the other one we had in common or no?
We did not have this in common at all because we had it on your list, and I did not.
We had spirited debate on this and where it stands. So we had spirited debate, but we decided on this being number 2. And it could be up for debate whether you want it to be sci-fi or action or whatever it might be. But you can't deny it was probably one of the best films of the decade, genreless, depending on what genre you want to put in. And we put Mad Max Fury Road at number 2. It's a tightrope whether you want to consider this sci-fi or action. Is it more sci-fi, more action? I would lean more action, but you know what? It's the perfect smorgasbord of everything I want. It's futuristic. It's what the Earth could be, or maybe what it's turning into now. We don't know. We don't know what's really going out in the desert of New Mexico or even the outback of Australia. They could have guitar players with big speakers with no eyes ripping a chord while they are chasing down one armed women in the desert. We do not. It could be a thing because it is the wild, wild Oz out there in Australia. But
I think it definitely fits as far as, it does have science fiction and fantasy elements. I 100% copped out though and eliminated it just so I can have other picks because I know for sure it's going to end up in one of my other genre lists. So I was looking for excuses not to include stuff on my list because I was running out of spots. So I think it definitely deserves to be in the discussion, but I cheated and canceled it on a technicality.
You got to double down sometimes. It's fine.
And DJ, I know you love this film.
Come on. This film gave us the most debate for the simple reason I look at it more of a I know this and Dawn are both kind of post-apocalyptic, but Dawn has the talking ape aspect. But again, not going to have to fight me long to put Mad Max Fury Road on a list. I'd be like, okay, you won me over. It's one of the greatest films.
Twist your arm, buddy.
You really have to twist my stubby arm to get this on the list.
I didn't wait.
I was debating you, but I was in the back of my mind. I was like, this is the greatest film you've seen.
I think you just wanted to give me crap for the sake of giving me crap.
Just give me crap, man. I love this movie. You know I love this movie.
I know you do.
Dan, I'm assuming you canceled this one out as well.
Yeah, I completely copped out. And
okay, perfect.
I'm a complete fraud. I'm sorry.
Both you guys failed.
I'm glad I wasn't alone.
Failed out.
Completely copped out.
So we will sing its praises in future episodes for sure, though.
It sounded like a senator right there. He goes, "Yes, I copped out.
I did not include that movie on my list.
Did not include that movie.
Fury Road.
All right. So for my number 2, man, this is a debate for me between 2 and 1. I can go back and forth depending on what day you ask me. Probably. It was my number 1 as far as the half decade went. I dropped it down to number 2 for the total decade. I'm going with 2013 film Spike Jonze's Her. This one just completely blew me away when it came out in 2013. Hey, also Amy Adams involved in this one. But we're talking about maybe mostly Joaquin Phoenix and obviously the voice performance by Scarlett Johansson. But this was so timely when it came out. It's probably even more timely as the decade has continued to go through as far as I don't know what you want to say, like the psychological aspects of it or there's so many questions it brings up on a higher level of thinking that I think it's just so worthy of being discussed in this genre. I mean, you do have your fun science fiction action films like we're talking about, where you can talk about An Edge of Tomorrow or a Pacific Rim. You have your fantastic elements like what we get with some of the ones that involve aliens. You get your think pieces like Inception and things like that. This is so like out of left field though. It's like a science fiction film like I had never seen before. And it still sticks with me. I still can't get Amanda to watch it. So that is on my goal of my list of things to do is to finally get her to watch it. I don't know if it'll appeal to her, but it appeals to me so much. I've been singing its praises since 2013 and I won't stop anytime soon. It is my number 2 and that is Her. Matt or DJ, any thoughts on that one?
I'm just glad I found somebody else that likes this movie other than me.
I had it near and around my list.
I remember we were talking about this on one of our last shows, and you just mentioned this is Scarlett Johansson's is great acting performance under the skin. I protest that this is maybe her best acting performance, mainly because she's not in the freaking movie. You just have her voice, and she's a fully realized character that I feel for. She makes me laugh. This movie, I think mainly because I had zero expectation for it, because I was like, what the Joaquin Phoenix as a love interest? All right, whatever. Because if you go from Joker to this is like the most normal Joaquin Phoenix you're ever going to see in a movie.
Talk about a decade for an actor too.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. But yeah, this movie's just it's about connection and connecting to a AI? Is it different from connecting to a person? And
Mhm.
scene where him and Amy Adams are just kind of on the roof near the end. This is like so much stuff I can pull out of this movie that's so good. I come back to watching it all the time. I'm just glad that somebody else liked it, because again, a lot of people don't like this movie. I don't know why.
I don't either. It doesn't
I don't
make
get
sense
it.
to me. Dan, what's your number 2?
My number 2 is one that's been talked about already, and it's one that I know Kevin hates. But it's Under the Skin is the Jonathan Glazer film.
There. Nice.
Absolutely love this film. It is, talking about experiences, one of the most unique experiences I think of any film I've watched the last decade. DJ mentioned the beach scene. It's one of the most disturbing moments in film, and I think just in the mundanity of it and how mundane it's shot. It's just you just watching this all take place. There's no score for a film that's filled with score. There's just it's just the crying of a baby. It just fills the air, and it's just it just seems so real, which I think is why that moment works. It's also some of the most tender moments. The sequence with the foreign man in a car, and for a film that is lacking in humanity, it's one of the most humane moments in all film that I've seen last decade. And Scarlett Johansson just doing so much with saying so little, and especially how it ends in such a kind of a tragic way that really haunts you. But I think it says a lot, and I think the score itself is just mind-tingling effective, and how it can just mess with your head, and the visuals as well are fantastic. It just again, I think I'm not sure as Matt or DJ mentioned, this is something I think Kubrick would appreciate, and I think that's very true. And the Kubrickian gets thrown around a lot, but I think there's probably no other film that came out last decade that better represents that than Under the Skin, because it has that. Although it's saying so much, and it's talking about humanity, it's talking about who we are, there's also a coldness to it that you tend to see with Kubrick films. And so I thought, it does very much remind me of that. So yeah, that's why it's my number 2. It was and remains. I think it was there number 2 halfway through, and it's still there now. So
excellent. All right. So multiple people loving Under the Skin. I'll have no problem with that. I'll let it slide. No, I'm just kidding. I made no digs about it. Number 1. It's time for everybody's number 1 picks. We'll start with the Simplistic Review crew. What do you guys have in number 1?
The only other movie we had in common, and it's really high because, and it's been mentioned, it's Edge of Tomorrow, Live, Die, Repeat. I like to call it All You Need Is Kill, because that's what it's based off of. A manga called All You Need Is Kill. And you were talking about how it's a great action movie. I mean, it's written by one of my favorite screenwriters, Christopher McQuarrie. It co-stars one of my favorite actresses, and Emily Blunt. It stars a guy that no matter how crazy his off-screen crap gets, he never ever phones in a performance, no matter how whatever film he's in. And Tom Cruise, it has a great concept. But the manga, we're going to talk about the action, which is amazing, Doug Liman and stuff like that. But there's a lot of stuff in a rewatch. This movie begs for a rewatch. And my favorite moment in this movie that I think is very analytical and it ties back into the manga, All You Need Is Kill, which is a play on All You Need Is Love. There's a scene, I guess, spoiler, because this thing happens over and over and over again for the 50th time. But where Tom Cruise is kind of falling for Emily Blunt's character, and Emily Blunt's character notices it and kills herself. And it shows that love is not what you need right now. All you need to do is kill. And right after that moment is the montage of Tom Cruise saving nobody. He just walks on the bridge. People are asking him to help, and he just keeps going. And because he does that, he gets farther than he got before. And I go, that's a really smart way to pull in that manga concept and the concept of the movie. Because again, on the surface, it's just Tom Cruise blowing up stuff. But there are things in this movie, if you rewatch it 75,000 times like I did, that you will pull out. Like, wow, this is really, really good. And the fact that it was so underappreciated because they didn't want to go with kill in the title, which I thought All You Need Is Kill is a really cool title compared to Edge of Tomorrow, which makes no sense, or Live, Die, Repeat, which is as kitschy as I've ever heard in my life.
It makes a lot of sense for the film, because guess what happens? Oh.
It just screams of studio head that doesn't understand the concept of the movie. But the movie was underappreciated. Nobody saw it, but everybody who I know has seen it goes, yeah, it's a good movie. At the least bit. Most people love this movie. People I don't know a lot of people that go, yeah, that movie sucks.
No.
I don't know that many. This movie is really, really good. If you take Groundhog Day and Starship Troopers and make a movie out of it, that's pretty damn clever. And I think this movie is a movie that if you haven't seen sci-fi wise, you will be rewarded watching it.
Absolutely. Matt, obviously you were in agreement with this one.
Yeah, we both had it. We both had it in our top. These were one of two films that we had in our collective list because our lists were very divergent in a lot of ways. But we agreed on this one for being
Nice.
number one. And I mean, to DJ's point, he brings up a more analytical, deeper meaning behind the film. I just like the mech robots blowing up the aliens. I think it's really cool. And once again, it's kind of got everything you want. It has a little bit of for everything. It's for everybody. It's got your blow up stuff. So you got your guys who are like, yeah, blow up stuff. And then you have your kind of like buddy film in a lot of ways where you have Emily Blunt and Tom Cruise kind of like learning how to cooperate together. But then they have like their tough group of roughneck, characters near the end, which I think is really cool. And you got aliens that kind of look like aliens from Gears of War, so that appeals to your video game nerds and stuff like that. And you get a lot of stuff that it's just put together, and Doug Liman does a great job of just doing the choreography for everything. Christopher McQuarrie wrote a really cool script and a really good idea. Tom Cruise, again, to DJ's point, doesn't really phone in a performance. I don't care if it's the Mummy. I don't care what it is. This guy is money. He's not the Mummy. He's money. That's what he is.
Know it, man. He doesn't even know it.
He doesn't even know how money he is right there. I even tied in another Doug Liman movie in there. How you like that? And Emily Blunt. She's always great, and I think this was her second film on this list, so that's a lot of fun as well. And I think I've only seen this one time. I saw it at home. I was like, wow, this movie is a lot of fun, and I'm probably gonna have to rewatch it again because
it's worth it.
That much damn fun.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely, if you haven't seen this one and you're listening now, put it on your list. Watch it soon. You'll enjoy it. You'll have some fun. That's for sure. My number one, I'm kind of surprised that it hasn't come up by anybody yet at this point, but I guess I'll be the first one to mention it. Going to a film that I guess technically was released in 2014, but for us in the States, we didn't get it till 2015. That's why it didn't make my half-decade list because I hadn't seen it yet. The director has already come up, obviously, and that is Alex Garland. We're talking about Alicia Vikander, Oscar Isaac, Domhnall Gleeson in a little movie called Ex Machina. I love this film. Amanda hates it, but I love it. It fits what I look for when I was talking about stuff like 10 Cloverfield Lane, Snowpiercer. You could even talk about her a little bit, but a limited cast, a limited setting, and you just get to see these people and interact and kind of delve into the dialogue and the acting and the decisions and the relationships and all that kind of stuff. And Alicia Vikander was like a revelation this last decade for me. I think she's an amazing actress. Obviously, we've seen Oscar Isaac in a bunch of different stuff throughout this even episode today. He's come up multiple times. So it depends on what week it is. Like sometimes I'm going to put her ahead of Ex Machina. Sometimes I'm going to put Ex Machina ahead of her. They're always going to be my number one and my number two, though. It just depends on what order I'm going to put them in. But man, I mean, even if I know people went nuts about Oscar Isaac's dance scene too, but this film's so much more than that to me. Like there's so much, and I just kind of love the twists and turns. I love how it ends. I know some people had a problem with that, but I love how it ends. And I will champion this forever. So Ex Machina is my number one. DJ or Matt, any thoughts on that one?
I mean, Matt, you love this movie, don't you?
I do. I mean, it made my top 20, so it was definitely under consideration. And I like the fact that we've spoken about a lot of films, sci-fi wise, that give it's the idea of connection and love. And kind of like this, I don't know, you think about like sci-fi in the 70s and 80s and 60s, even 60s to a certain degree. It's very cold, dark, dingy, there isn't a lot of hope for humanity. It's very just bummer. Whereas, I mean, this is a little bit of both because it's kind of like creating something that could potentially be loved, but then also learning enough humanity and how dark. I mean, this movie isn't really about love. It's more like, you guys suck. I'm going to be the next step in evolution because you guys are horrible, and I'm going to be the machine that. So it's got that Westworld quality. So that's the biggest comparison I can make to not the film, but so much the TV show. But yeah. I mean, there's so much about. I mean, I love Alex Garland as a role. I know we talked about Annihilation earlier. Dan brought it up, and there's just something dark and cold and just so. I don't know. It's I love it. It's clean, it's crisp, and there's something about this film movie that, but at the end of the day, it's, we're creating machines that we think we know better than ourselves, or we want to create in our visage, and then these machines kind of like, I don't know, there's something about it that just
Gonna replace us. We're
They're probably already
creating our
out there.
replacements.
They're
Yes.
already out there. They're in the world right now.
We think we're creating our slaves, but we're actually
creating our future
replacements.
masters.
Yeah. So
I love it. I'm into it.
All right. Dan, your thoughts on Ex Machina, and then your number one.
Yeah, obviously, I also really enjoy it. I debated a lot between Annihilation and Ex Machina. Again, I think the reason I went with Annihilation is I feel it does more. The story itself, I think, is I don't know if it does more is the right terminology. I think it hit me more with what it was going for, and thematically than Ex Machina, but they're both brilliant movies. And I think, if I remember, I think Ex Machina won Best Special Effects at the Oscar, which is remarkable considering, it probably had 1/100th the budget of the films it was going against. So that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
My number one. Well, guess what, DJ? Kevin's not the only one that likes her. I also really
thank God. I would
I didn't want to give it away.
Folks. There we go.
Yeah,
So-
buries the lead so well.
He is a senator.
He is.
But yeah, her when we did our top 100 favorite films, her was in my top 10, and as we're going to be doing our top films of the decade, I'll just I won't say a huge amount, but there's so much about this movie that I really enjoy, and it's certainly about relationships and conversation. But what I think what really works with the movie is there's a lack of judgment in what it explores. Like it opens up on a scene where Joaquin Phoenix is giving this elegant soliloquy of love, and you feel it just the way it's performed, the words he's saying, and then you realize it's him making a letter for someone else, because he's writing on behalf of someone else for the job he does, basically writing personalized notes to people and loved ones. But I think it's easy to be cynical at something like that. Like, oh, why would someone allow someone else to write and do that for them and not do it themselves? But I think it looks at is anything different than the gift cards that we have. But he also then talks about the people that he's writing with and how they have this loving relationship, and he's been learning about them throughout. And so there's, even though it seems like it's set up as a joke, I think it goes more than that. And then when he does fall in love with this AI, the people around him don't judge him for it. Like they, it's not like he's being ostracized or something like that.
Jealous.
Yeah, exactly. It's something, and I think that's what's interesting about it. Is that it removes that element of judgment for much of the movie, and it's really ironic too, because the chemistry between Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson is phenomenal. But then you realize that they never worked with each other. That itself was artificially created because it was another actress that was doing that role, and it just didn't work. So they had Scarlett Johansson go in and fill in that role. So even though it seems like that, like they're deeply, and that they're connecting, it was put together by movie magic in a way. So, and again, it made me that and Under the Skin. I didn't realize until I'm doing it now that I've two Scarlett Johansson films back to back, but two very different performances. And one where she's on screen and she says nearly nothing, and then another one where it's only her voice. It just, to me, showed her range. It's also a really funny film too. The video game sequences are funny, and it's beautiful. It's a gorgeous looking movie, and I just love the future that they create. It feels somewhat real without, it hits that barometer really well, where it's it's set in the future, so it doesn't seem like today, but not to the point where it's too outlandish. Like the style of clothing and the choices that they make are interesting and realistic without being obvious. So I think there's a lot similar with Annihilation to kind of take out of it, how we deal with relationships, the artificiality of the world we're creating, but also asking if there's a benefit to it as well. So I don't know. There's so much about her that I've really enjoyed and connected with since the first time I've seen it. It's probably the movie this decade I've seen the most out of anything. I just actually rewatched it for the first time in a long time, and I just realized why I loved it again. So it cemented it as my number one pick for this genre. So
I like the juxtaposition of when he talks to Scarlett Johansson, he's warm and bubbly, and then when he talks to his ex-fiance or girlfriend, Rooney Mara, it's robotic and cold.
Yeah.
Just to flip the script on that, where this is an actual human person that feels like you're talking to a machine, and when you're actually talking to a machine, you're talking to a human person. That movie is very, very, very ahead of its time, and I think it's going to hold up very, very, very well for what you're just talking about, how the future is not like flying cars. It's just like, a realistic future.
Yeah.
Man, I'm surprised at the sheer number of crossover we had. We're very much in unison today as three different lists. So just real quickly, films that made it on two people's lists, that would be Her, Arrival, Annihilation, Edge of Tomorrow, Inception, Gravity, Attack the Block, and Under the Skin. Those all made two people's lists, and we had two films that made all three of our lists. That would be The Martian and Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. So a lot of crossover there. But before we get too far to close the show, I want to at least talk about a few honorable mentions, films that didn't quite make the list in somewhat of a quick form. But before we get to each other's list, let me just real quick highlight some stuff that didn't get mentioned that were on the half-decade list for the Cent and for Hyro. Films like, let's see here, we had Europa Report, we had Robot and Frank, one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, Hercules as a fantasy film. We had most of Hyro's list did not make it here today, so we would talk about Super 8, Men in Black 3, Elysium, Only Lovers Left Alive, Lucy, About Time, and Interstellar. Some films that made those half-decade lists. DJ and Matt, what about some of the ones that were on your individual list that didn't make the combined list?
Only ones that haven't been mentioned for me was Source Code with Jake Gyllenhaal, Duncan Jones, David Bowie's son. Upgrade, which is Venom, the Venom movie if it was done correctly, and Chronicle, which is probably the only found footage movie that I will actually own.
Nice. Matt, what about you?
On the list that we didn't really talk about, I had Spring, which is more like a fantasy fable monster love story. That was down the list. I had Dread on there as well too, just because it's a badass movie. I had The Lobster on here as well, Dan. It was just kind of on my list, but it was definitely up there. And I had The Shape of Water, which is higher on the list as well. Those were kind of the ones. I had some love stories on my list. I feel the love. There's a
big
love
softy.
fantasy.
Yes, softy.
My fantasy is to be loved one day by a giant gill man.
Nice. I also had Shape of Water, like fighting for that 10th spot. It just got knocked off. Another one that I wasn't quite sure from a genre standpoint if I would include it here or not, but A Quiet Place I really enjoyed. Fits my limited cast and setting would be Z for Zachariah. I liked that film, I feel like, more than a lot of people I talk to. Ad Astra from last year, Interstellar. I immediately disqualify all Star Wars films from discussion on all lists because I can't separate my bias from anything. So
I just
can't judge them fairly. So yeah. If you wanted to stretch it, maybe A Monster Calls. That one hit an emotional chord for me, and it does have a little bit of a fantastical element. I just feel like it wasn't sci-fi or fantasy enough to get it on here. But those were some that I would mention. Dan, what about you?
So for me, some other films that weren't brought up, Upstream Color, the Shane Carruth film, was this long-awaited follow-up to Primer. It's just been such a long time since I've seen it. I just didn't really remember much about it. Like, it was one of those movies I really enjoyed at the time, but I couldn't, like, as I was trying to rethink about it and thinking, like, oh, do I really like that movie still? There was nothing there. Safety Not Guaranteed, which I guess saying it's a science fiction film could be potentially a spoiler. So why didn't include it, but it's a nice little film. I think that's really been forgotten, maybe because Colin Trevorrow's follow-ups haven't been all that well received since then. He's gone to do the different Jurassic Park films and things like that. I know a lot of people didn't like The World's End, the end of the Edgar Wright trilogy, but I actually really like that movie. I think it's really underrated, and I think it's actually one of Simon Pegg's best performances. So that was an honorable mention for me. And and similar, I didn't include Star Wars films. If I did, potentially Last Jedi, I would mention Mad Max. Blade Runner's up there, Snowpiercer, as we talked about. And Shape of Water's a movie I loved. And I thought about including fantasy, but I think I separated it out from this list personally. But if I did include that, that'd be within my top 4. So.
Yeah, I think the only other two that were on your half decade list that haven't been mentioned was Cabin in the Woods and Harry Potter and Deathly Hallows. Possibly a little bit more fantasy on those as well, perhaps causing them to not make the list.
Yeah, I forgot about Cabin in the Woods, honestly, because when I was doing the list, it didn't populate as a science fiction film.
Yes,
but
I
yeah,
thought that one is more of a horror. That's why I didn't really include it.
Yeah.
Sci-fi horror. It's got some sci-fi.
That's kind of what I did with A Quiet Place too. I kind of thought that.
I mean, I was trying to include. I was potentially thinking about including Get Out in the list as well because of the science elements, and maybe not science fiction, but there is a science fiction.
It's fringy. It's like right on the edge.
It's right on the edge because at the very end you don't know it's sci-fi. It's like, oh, there's a doctor doing experiments on people. How about that? So that's a bit. If there was ever a horror list, I mean, I think it would be higher on the list there.
Sure, for sure.
And I'd probably get in trouble since Amanda's not on the record if I didn't at least mention the name Chappie somewhere in here because she loves that film.
Oh no!
So, I actually like it too. Just like Matt's love of Hercules with The Rock, I think that's a great film too. Just to have fun with. And one last thing before we kind of go, as we're looking back at the decade overall, I kind of open with this too. I think it's a really strong decade for science fiction. Also, just look at all the different directors we talked about, from Garland to Denis Villeneuve to we had Ridley Scott here, obviously Christopher Nolan. There's just Bong Joon-ho. There was so many good directors that had different films that came out during this decade that I think it just probably is credit to why we had so many good films. But Dan, what are kind of some of your overall thoughts on the decade and kind of maybe some doors that it opened going forward, or just kind of closing thoughts?
Like I mentioned as we started, I think what we saw this decade was how the science fiction genre expanded. A lot of movie films that we even touched upon that are really low budget, but like I think Europa Report is a good example of it. That's a good looking movie considering it's doing things that you would expect more of a bigger film to do. We had a lot of science fiction films we talked about that are based a lot in relationships, oddly enough. And I think that's maybe speaks to what we're trying to figure out this generation as technology gets more integrated in everyday lives and understanding our relationship with it and with one another and how we connect. I mean, connecting through podcasts right now, through technology and things of that nature. I would see that's probably something we're going to see further and further as things go on. And I guess the other question would be, how does format impact that of science fiction in a way where, we talked about with Gravity, how that's very much a spectacle film. Well, if the theaters are somewhat in doubt, do we see less of that? Do we see more movies like Ex Machina and less like Gravity? Who knows? I hope we get a good mixture of both because I think it leads to better film overall. But
yeah, absolutely. DJ and Matt, I'll give you. We're running out of time, but I'll give you a quick minute or two to kind of sum up your thoughts and closing thoughts on the science fiction genre, and to tell everybody how they can hear more about your thoughts on general stuff.
That's your department, Stewart. I just
you have your time. You can have.
You have
1 minute for rebuttal.
I give my time to Mr. Stewart.
Oh, well, I won't speak for DJ, but at the same time, it's funny looking at. It almost seems like two parts of a decade where I feel the first part of 2010 seemed to focus a lot more on fantasy and not really a care for. I mean, there were science fiction films, of course, interspersed, but you look at things like Harry Potter was finishing up, Hunger Games was finishing up, like a lot of YA things like
Pirates
that.
of the Caribbean was going on.
Yeah, Pirates of the Caribbean. So there was a lot of this. I don't want to say kiddie films because these films are for everybody, so everybody can enjoy them. But then on the second half of the decade, we got these higher working films that just kind of worked relationship wise, trying to figure out what kind of world we're in. And I don't know if that was some sort of like commentary on the world that we were entering into, but guess what, everybody? We are here. So this is where we're at right now. So if Her was a harbinger for things to come, we're here. If all these other things are a harbinger for things to come, we are here. But we can look at the aspect that if these science fiction films and these directors and everybody from all different walks of life and heritages and nationalities, gender, everything else that were directing all these films that we were talking about, I still have some hope for us. And that's the most positive you will ever hear me be ever on a podcast. Anyway, you can catch all of our stuff at simplisticreviews.net, all the podcasts, all the reviews, everything, the store where you can buy merchandise for us as well too, simplisticreviews.net. You can find everything under the sun on that one website.
We definitely recommend you guys going there and subscribing to their show as well. You can keep up to date with everything we're doing by following Cinema Geeks. The Twitter is at CinemaGeekCast, or you can just go to the website geekcastradio.com where you can find our post and comment there. We will definitely interact or respond to any feedback we get as we continue our journey to do all of these top of the decade genre lists. Like we said, we already did animated, so you can check that out if you haven't. Now we have science fiction, and we have more to come. Dan, how can people stay in touch with you on the interwebs?
You can find me at Twitter at DXO_Dan.
All right. And you can also definitely do that if you're a comic book fan, because Dan is always posting good information on the best comics that are out there and stuff to read or stuff that you could expose yourself to that you might not know exist. Definitely do that. And my Twitter is at OptimusSolo. If you have any questions for me, just hit me up there. But that does it for this week. DJ, Matt, thank you guys so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you guys and listen to your thoughts on movies and all things geek related.
Is it Kevin?
Have it on.
What's that? Is it? Yes, it is. I'm not lying. I'm not the politician here. All right. So,
one of us isn't, at least.
Surrounded by senators here.
Right. That's it for this week. Tune in next time for another chance to listen to more Cinema Geeks.